Welcome to Gotta Run with Will. My name's Jonathan Kane. I'm the guest host for this episode. My very special guest today is a fixture in the New York running community. Is both a runner and a coach. Stuart Calderwood, welcome to Gotta Run with Will.
Hey, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here. I want to talk about your running history, your coaching history, a little bit about your writing, all sorts of different things. But let's just start off and talk a little bit about how you got started in the sport, how and when.
Don't you think we should start off with talking about how we met?
Yes.
Jonathan Kane showed up at a race that nobody takes seriously.
Nobody.
It's a spring couples relay, which is male-female couple. One of them runs, one rides. They both have to get in a big, heavy wooden rowboat and race around the boat pond in Central Park. Jonathan got out his wind trainer, set it up in the parking lot, and started racing triathlon style. I had to bike that day. I looked at him and said, I guess I'm not winning. That was the first time I saw him. I thought he was really arrogant. Like, come on, man. You're taking it this seriously? You brought all this stuff? I think they did win, though. It's aggravating.
Well, actually, yeah, we got third place that day. We did finally win it a couple of years later, but, and yes, I mean, you and I have talked about it. I think your team and my team were among the minority of the group that were taking it seriously. Whereas most people would show up in matching outfits and have a good time, and yeah, you guys were there to win, we were there to win.
Combined 150-year age group like that.
But
yeah.
We managed to strike up a friendship. That was 20 years ago.
Right.
And yeah, you were kind enough to invite me to work out with Central Park Track Club.
And made you faster.
And
I remember
you made me a lot faster.
Yelling at you a lot in intervals in the Armory.
You did, and it's actually, you know, I mean, yes, you've totally co-opted the conversation, but that's fine. But in all seriousness, though, one of the things that I remember about that, like, yes, I was a decent cyclist back in the day. I was a very ordinary runner, and yet you invited me to run workouts and then ultimately joined Central Park Track Club, which is a group of really talented athletes, including you. Yeah. But I never, whether it was from you, basically the other members, but Tony Ruiz, the coach there, I never felt like a second-class citizen there. And
that's an all-inclusive team.
But you'll grant me that there are plenty of teams of maybe of lesser talent than CPTC, where if you were putting up the times that I was, you wouldn't get any attention. And yet I distinctly remember the first time I broke 20 minutes in 5K, which was a pretty pedestrian time for most of the guys in that club.
Right.
You and Tony you seemed as excited as I was. And I appreciated that, and I've taken that to my coaching practice and tried to, you know, if an athlete takes things seriously, I take them seriously regardless of what their time goals are.
That's the key to the whole coaching thing, is what you're born with is random. And what you do with it is not. That's reflecting what you put into it, how you think, how you feel about it, how much concentration on it you give yourself, and what comes of it then is valuable. The improvement amount is valuable, or the consistency or something, or how you overcome conditions. Things like that are universal. It doesn't matter how fast you are.
Yeah.
I'm weird in that I started coaching at pretty much the same time that I started running, and that was as a freshman in high school, which I don't think I've ever encountered anyone else that would say that. When I was in high school track, my coach took a few of us who I guess he thought had interest in, passing on information, and put us in charge of little kid teams, little grade school kid teams in the summer track league. So I was big to them, and I was a coach, but I was 14 or 15. Right. So that was when I started. At the same time I started really competing in track and field, I was also coaching track and field. That pretty much parallel throughout my life.
Did you know right away in either of those tracks, whether as an athlete or a coach, did you realize early on that that's something that you wanted to do? That, I mean, maybe you wouldn't anticipate doing it nearly 50 years later, but did you feel a real pull there right away?
Running, yes. I did have a hiatus in coaching until I was in my early 20s. I didn't coach the whole time I was in college, I didn't coach. But then I was invited by my ex-coach to coach my high school team, which was a huge honor. It's this was Laguna Beach, California. And to be given a head coaching job at a school that had a real good history. Sure. We had a coach that basically shaped my ideas as much as anyone has about coaching. Len Miller, who ended up coaching Steve Scott, who had the American record in the mile for 26 years. And it was the second fastest guy in the world ever at one point to Sebastian Coe.
So
And
was Len Miller was he
was
the
my high
coach
school
in high school who put you in charge of those younger
Yes.
kids and then brought you back after you went to,
Actually, he was replaced by his assistant, who
Okay.
was another celebrity of sorts, Jim Toomey, who was Bill Toomey, the decathlete world record holder, Olympic champion's brother,
Okay.
who himself was a gold medalist in baseball at the Pan Am Games. And he was our coach after Len Miller, and then when he left, he asked me to do it. And I
Interesting.
thought that was, I would never pass that up. In fact, I kind of derailed my life path to do that.
Really? It's interesting how, again, you say you sort of got tapped by that, by your former coach and
Yeah.
all the things you learned. And I posted something the other day about a workout that I was doing, and someone just randomly on Twitter said, really sorry, but I'm going to steal that workout from, and I was like, why would you apologize? I mean, I've stolen workouts from you, from Tony Ruiz, that's what you do.
Which
I
is
mean, we're
good.
not reinventing the wheel.
I
but
make my
you learn from
workouts
each
for
other.
everybody else to take. Did you see that whole Mo Farah thing? A bizarre case of that. Apparently that altercation that Mo Farah had before the recent London Marathon
Right.
was based on another group's apparently stealing his workouts. Or he thought they did. And their entourages had a clash in a
Really?
hotel gym.
Yeah, I knew there had been
Yeah.
a
Yeah,
conflict,
very
but I
strange,
didn't
very
really
strange.
understand what that was about. Yeah, I don't quite
Whereas
understand that. I mean,
Eliud Kipchoge shows you his workouts online if you want to see them.
yeah, I mean, I've never quite understood that.
And what do
group
they
of
say
people.
about imitation?
There you go. So let's back up a little bit. So
Okay.
you went to high school, you ran from the time you were a freshman.
Yep, all 4 years, track and cross country.
Okay,
Yeah, behind one of the greatest high school runners that ever lived, so I never won a thing.
interesting.
We had a guy, Eric Hulst,
Okay,
who set many world records, and he won the state 2-mile championship as a junior in 8:44. So figure that out, 2 miles in high school. I think at the time he might have been
That's
behind
moving.
only Craig Virgin and Jerry Lindgren all time. And then those times were eclipsed later by people like Galen Rupp and Lucas Verzbikas, I think, has it now. But yeah, he was like, I'd be threatened with being lapped,
Really?
in the 2 mile. It's just kind of scary. But, I was a very serious high school runner.
okay. So you're a serious high school
Despite the fact
runner.
that I was originally disabused of any notion of being great, because here's this guy that was so much better than I was.
Basically, you're saying there was distance between you and him, but what about the rest of the team? Were you
I was
sort of
a very frequent number 2,
Okay.
but invisibly. Yeah.
right? Yeah, when you've got
Yeah.
someone who
But
stands out
when
that
I got
much.
to longer races and probably did this too soon, I sort of tried to escape Eric by doing marathons. But he did them too. He ran a 2:32 marathon in his first try. I think
Not
he
a
was a
shabby
high school
debut.
junior, high school senior. Yeah.
And when was your marathon debut? Which you said
I was a senior also. It was a different marathon. I ran my first one in Mission Bay, California, San Diego area, 2:55.
Yeah,
41
okay, anyway.
seconds.
And then where'd you run in college?
UC Irvine, right down the street,
Okay.
for the same coach.
Oh,
My first
interesting.
high school coach, he quit to go there. And
Gotcha.
then he had
Okay,
Steve
so it all
Scott there.
stayed kind of insulated
Yeah,
there.
for a while. Yeah, he made Steve Scott into a miler. He'd been a half miler in high school. He told him, "You run the mile for me, I'll make you an Olympian." And he did.
He did? No,
Yeah.
that's,
Three-time Olympian.
yeah, if you can deliver on
He was
that,
a good
that's
guy,
not too
Steve.
shabby.
And Eric went there too, of course. My high school teammate.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How'd you feel about that at the time?
I kind of knew he was going there all along because we were disciples of Len Miller. But Eric had a tragic later life. He died at 34 of brain cancer. Yeah.
Wow.
But still has things in his running past that are unparalleled
Really?
as far as I've ever seen.
Interesting.
Yeah, he won the World Junior Cross Country Championship when he was in high school.
Wow.
Beat everyone in the world, about 700 meters. Salazar was in that race.
Really?
You know?
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he
Beating
was
Salazar
a
by
real,
daylight, that's
he
impressive.
was a real deal. Yeah,
Wow.
Eric Hulst. Yeah,
That's
look him
impressive.
up.
So then you said you had a little hiatus before you started coaching again.
Coached after college. I went to
and then
college,
got brought back into that.
Yeah.
And did you like working with high school athletes? Did you?
Probably, up till now, the best job I've ever had. Now I have a job that I would compare to it. But yeah, and it was a huge challenge because after those guys left, Len Miller and then Toomey, there became a succession of walk-on one-year type coaches, and the program deteriorated to the point that we had nothing. Like they didn't. I mean, when I was in high school, we won a lot, and it got to the point where there wasn't even a full team.
Really?
When I took it over in 1983, I think I had 5 boys and 9 girls, and the 5 boys were not all varsity age, so I didn't even have a team. I couldn't put a varsity team out there. And 4 years later, we won boys and girls league championships.
Wow.
So that was
Impressive.
probably the proudest thing in my life.
That's something to be proud of.
But I basically reinvigorated the Miller ethos. Like he had shown me what to do to make a great team.
Right.
I emulated him a lot.
That makes a lot of sense. How long did you stay there?
7 years.
7 years, okay.
And in the 7th year, we won the state. Boys won the state.
Very nice.
Cross-country champs.
Okay, so you're still out in sunny California. How'd you end up here?
Here, I ended up in New York for going to grad school in poetry at Brooklyn College. I got accepted by Allen Ginsberg, turned that down. So relocated. And then I got trapped. I've never been able to escape the New York magnetism.
So speaking of New York, and you referenced briefly other jobs and stuff, so you are now the head coach at New York Roadrunners,
Yep.
which is it's a big title, a big responsibility.
Yeah.
And I'm sure very different than coaching high school
Very different.
cross-country track.
Except in some ways, absolutely the same. I mean, you get complete beginners, like many, many high school freshmen are. You get people that don't know what, a kilometer means or what a 10K is or what interval training is or, anything, like high school kids tend not to in their first, exposure to the sport. You get people who've never raced, which is obviously familiar to high school kids. But then, in the same group, you can have people who are, 15-minute 5K runners and good marathoners, sub-3. We have a lot of sub-3 marathoners.
So tell me a little bit about what being the head coach there. I mean, so you've sort of described what the audience is, but it's not the same thing as going to a track or cross-country meet with
track.
kids.
I wish there was a track.
I know, it's what New York.
One thing I miss
when
a
I'm
lot.
king, we're putting a track right in the middle of the city.
I take my runners to 2 tracks, which I in fun, call the 2 worst tracks in the world. They call the Armory the fastest track in the world. We have rivals for the worst track in the world. One is on the Great Hill in Central Park. I think it's 350 yards. And I've run into people who think they're running quarter miles in amazingly fast times.
It's going to be kind of disappointing when they go to
6-minute pace all the time for these 350
It's not going to end well.
And the other one's down on the Hudson River Greenway. It's about at 70th Street. There's a weird little track. It's a 200. It looks like a D, though. One straightaway. But I think it's meant to be a track. There's a stadium of sorts. There's a field in the middle. It looks like sort of cinders. And it's this awful ruddy thing that has a hill and a bank that goes the wrong bank. It throws you off.
So off camber to go.
Yeah, instead of keeping you on the curve, it
throwing you off. What the heck?
off into the Hudson. Anyway, no track. But the job is basically making programs for 8-week, usually, sessions of 8 weeks of either Tuesday only or Thursday only or both for my Central Park part of it. And then those workouts are very similarly replicated all over the city. There's Prospect Park those same days at the same times. There's Astoria Park in Queens. There's Van Cortlandt Park in the Bronx. We have Staten Island starting up in Silver Lake Park. There's East River Park track, where they do have a track. But I don't get to coach there. And, lots of locations. And they're evenings, mornings, depending, and all year round. So one session after another, usually building up to, one of our big races, but people can use it for any purpose. My workouts have about 80 people in each of the 4 sessions that I coach per week, 4 workouts, Tuesday morning, Thursday morning, and Tuesday evening, Thursday evening, all big groups, and we split them up by size, by speed, so like 20 people maximum per group. And we go do either a tempo run or a speed workout.
Do you have a lot of continuity from one 8-week session to the next in terms of the athletes? So it's not just nice to know you for 8 weeks and then they go on.
Well, some of them disappear, of course, but you tend to notice the ones that stick around.
Sure.
And I would say we probably end up with more than 2/3 returners.
That's impressive.
Because we let them get in a day early, so they get to come back if they want. If they're smart, they're on their computer. But yeah, we get new ones every time, and it's always nice to see the long-term progress, but people can get whatever they want out of it.
And it must be nice. I mean, you've been part of the sport for almost 50 years now, and I mean, clearly the sport has changed. I mean, it's in terms of the level of participation, and no doubt Roadrunners has had a lot to do with that here in New York and probably worldwide to an extent. So it must be rewarding to have a hand in that.
It is. In fact, I mean, I didn't start anything there. There's always been a great organization, but I was there when it was, at East 89th Street and a much smaller staff and different CEO, and I was aware of it way back. I got my first New York Marathon number handed to me by Fred LeBeau.
Wow.
So it's weird to have actually had a friend who is now a statue. You don't get that often.
That doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't, think about it.
And what year did you run your first New York?
83.
So that was back in the, send in the self-addressed stamped envelope days and all that
people
stuff.
People stood in that line, remember that? But I told him, someone said, talk to Fred. And I told him my time. He fill it out. Gave me an entry form.
There you go.
He was a good guy. I always got along with him.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me, that people who never met him, who didn't know, when they see the changes that have happened in Roadrunners, and people try and decide what he would have approved of or wouldn't have, and back in if Fred were still in charge, well, who knows what would happen, and things change, and I think and don't get me wrong, I can play the grumpy old man and tell people, tell the kids to get off my lawn as well as the next guy, but I mean, who knows what Fred LeBeau would have been doing, what he would have advocated, and
he was a constant innovator, so he would have gone along with changes easily, I think.
I
don't know. I mean, he didn't have to deal with a 50,000 runner field, 50 plus, and the logicians at Roadrunners are amazing. I think that's the point where I'm in awe of the place. I mean, I understand the running world, but I don't understand the putting on an event for 50,000 people world. Those people just make me stand back in amazement that thing works. It always works.
I can't imagine it.
And when you go to other places, you see the difference. And I'm not just shilling for my company. I didn't work at Roadrunners until, 12 years now. But before that, I always thought, this place puts on a race, right? Because I'd go to other places, and outside, the big marathons around the world are pretty well done. But if you go to any given small race in some other state, you're in for a very different experience.
Yeah.
Very often, not the right measurement, or bottlenecks of getting to places, or bad return of baggage, or it's always something. Something that's you're thinking, this would not happen in New York.
Mile markers in the wrong place and things like that. Although did New York did they mess it up the year? Was the year that a disputed Salazar? I mean, we're going back decades. Disputed Salazar world record, right?
I would have been so upset if that record would have. He still would have run it, because his record was enough under Derek Clayton's. Clayton had run 208.33 and Salazar ran 208.13, but the difference was not that much.
So so the course was short, but even if it had,
in other words, he would have finished under the record. Yeah, it was his second win. It was first he said he'd break 210, and he did. Then he said he'd break the world record, and he did. The third year, he ended up beating Gomez in that great duel. But he ran 3 straight, his first 3 marathons. But yeah, he was deprived of that. So was Allison Rowe, who won the women's that year. The only year.
Would that have been a record as well? Or I didn't realize that. Interesting. I think I just heard more of Salazar fussing about it. And
you don't hear about her. She broke
I didn't know.
Greta Weitz's world record.
Interesting.
Which had been set 3 straight times at New York.
All right. So we talked a lot about Stuart the coach. I want to talk at least a little bit about Stuart the athlete.
If you must.
So you mentioned your marathon debut many years ago.
Yeah.
Marathon PR is
2:28:05.
2:28:05. I'd be just a few miles behind you. You have a couple of really, to me, really impressive streaks that I'm fascinated by.
They're totally unintentional. It's weird, except for the last. I mean, the one I probably weirdly am most proud of is the one that just got broken, and I didn't even know I had it. Apparently, I had a record.
Okay, so the record.
I've always
tell
wanted
the
to have a record
audience.
of something. No, you run a 5-minute mile if you're in high school track pretty early on in your life, and I did it when I was a sophomore in high school. So then, if you're any good at continuing on as an athlete, you don't get slower until you're in your mid-30s or later. So all those years, I never stopped running, and that was just because I liked. I never got uninterested, and a lot of men I find that I compete with now, they had big gaps in their participation. They either ran high school, college, and then didn't throughout their whole 20s and 30s, or they never ran when they were young, did something else, and then got into it later in life.
Right, I see a lot of that.
I'm weird in that I ran the whole time.
Okay, so you ran a mile.
Yeah, so while I was running the mile when I was in my good years, I ran 5K well under 5-minute pace. So I was always running a sub 5-minute mile. And then when I got into my 40s, I actually liked the mile to race. So I did like indoor nationals and things like that. And I was always running in the 440s and stuff. So the weird record was I ran a sub 5-minute mile for 42 years in a row. But I didn't know who knows who has the record at that. No one talked about it. I mean, I never thought it was a record, that there was a record to get. But then, just recently, I noticed that they were talking about Steve Spence, who was a third place in World Championships, 210 marathoner, 211 marathoner. Daughter Neely Spence Gracie is now world class. Anyway, he kept running miles under 5. And I thought a couple years ago, he'd gotten to 41. Well, I had to stop when I was 56 because my darn son made me play soccer and I hurt my hamstring.
How dare he?
Yeah, and I had like a month to go before the end of the year, and I was going to have to run the sub 5, and I couldn't get back in shape for my hamstring was messed up. So I lost my streak at age 56. But this guy Spence, he ran 41, and then last year he ran 42. And so I was thinking, unless something goes really wrong, he's going to have more than me.
Right.
And when they put it out there, now this year he just ran sub 5, and so they're calling it the record. So I think retroactively, it was a world record.
You did have it, okay.
Without knowing it.
But that's, and look, I mean, I'm sure there are.
He'll probably get more years. He's really,
but that's,
really
I
good.
mean, if nothing else, just the consistency of doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sub 5 is not shabby.
It's not
And
easy.
you're right. I mean, at certain ages, it's more impressive than others. But to
Right.
just have the consistency to stay healthy, to do it every year, to actually get out there and not have those big hiatuses, which,
True.
as you pointed out, I mean, so many runners do. For whatever reason, whether they burn out mentally, physically.
Yeah.
So to have that consistency to me seems remarkable. You also have a marathon streak of
Which
sorts.
I also found out only after I had 5 decades of this thing. That there's a 5 decades under 3 club, and I'm in it because I've broken a 3-hour marathon in every decade from the 70s to now. But the weird thing is, I have a sub 250. And I think there may be one other guy who has that, but that's it. So that's pretty good. Sub 250 in my teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s.
And you are now what age, Mr. Calderwood?
61, but I can't run sub 250 anymore. But there's an outside chance I might break 3 hours, which would be the first person over 6 decades. But it's looking shaky. I don't know.
Do you intend to
I'll give it a shot in
shot?
Berlin this year.
Berlin,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So
I mean, that's where you got to go, right? Instead of saying, I wonder what that time would have been in Berlin,
you go to Berlin.
go to Berlin.
That's amazing. So
I'll
now
just try to hang on Kipchoge's line.
there you go. Just hang on. That's a great strategy.
He seems to set records there.
Go out really fast and pick it up from there.
Yes.
So you've got the streak. So you have the sub 250 for 5 decades, and now you're hoping to be the first one to ever do sub 3 for 6 decades.
Yeah, these are very obscure records. You see, if you want to be good at something, you just look long enough, and you'll find something so obscure that so few people have done it that you can say you're really good at it.
Oh, trust me, if I could find the joggling while running backwards, I would find any world record I could. So you don't have to. And all joking aside, though, those are legit. I mean, yes, there's you get the sort of like, okay, the fastest guy dressed as the Eiffel Tower while no, those are legit times.
I'll say when Steve Spence does something and it's only him that's up with me, I'll say, oh, all right, I did something pretty decent.
That's not too shabby.
Because I think he ran like 4 flat.
Yeah,
So
pretty storied
I
career.
did not.
And that's so the sub 3 club that you've exceeded by going sub 250. How many people are in the sub 3?
When I got in, I think there were like 26, and now I think there are more than 30. A few more have joined it after me. One guy from my high school who was on my high school track team. I couldn't believe it. He was there before I was. I looked up the list, and Don Dimitriades, who I was a senior when he was a freshman. Darn guy beat my 2-mile time in high school, and now he's beating my marathon time.
How dare he?
Well,
you guys are probably the only high school with 2 sub.
There
you go.
He's a philosophy professor.
Impressive. So you mentioned Berlin is ahead. What else is in the
trying to
future?
do?
Yeah, what do you mean?
I live vicariously through the runners now that I coach, which is much easier because there's always one of them or so that does really well. No, I'm kidding. I have some runners that I really care about who I get to coach, and it does feel more important. Being an athlete yourself is fairly self-interested almost all the time. And I mean, you share running. I share running with friends and run with friends. But as far as what I accomplished, although these things are fun to talk about, I'm not even trying to be Mr. Good Guy. I was happier when a couple of people recently did things that I got to help by coaching. And not because I helped them, but just watching them. Like watching this one woman run the Fifth Avenue Mile and run the time to the second that we predicted she could do after she had done all these workouts based on trying to hit that time, which was sub 5:20. She ran 5:18.9 and placed in her age group at Fifth Avenue. You know, things like that, that'll never get old.
No,
and I can't get too old to do it. That's the thing. I can get too old to run a sub-3 marathon, but I hope I can't for quite a while get too old to help other people run faster.
No, that's wonderful, and it's a really, you know, and again, I mean, I've learned from you. I've learned from another, you know, from a small circle of other coaches, and it's true. And there's a real satisfaction when you see one of your athletes.
You're a city coach, man.
Yeah, there you go. But no, it's true though. I mean, there's a satisfaction when your athlete does well. There you go.
He's not saying he has a business as a coach.
But yeah, but look, and I'm proud. I joke all the time. I mean, I'm a 55-year-old man who's never had a job that required me to wear long pants to work.
That's what I say when they say, "Why do you do the job you do?" I say, "Let me come to work dressed like this."
It's a beautiful thing, and I consider myself very lucky, and I share that. You know, when one of your athletes does really well, there's a satisfaction, and when they do really well, and for me, it's when they do really well and it goes the way I anticipated, or they say, "Hey, coach, you know what? We were at mile 21, and I knew that if I threw in a surge the way you told me on that guy, I was patient, I waited, and then, you know, those types of things, and you feel like you really contributed to it."
You contributed, exactly. And what about if it's your wife, Nicole?
Well, yes,
one of the better triathletes I've ever seen compete.
Yeah, she's the talent of the family.
Didn't she win 2 out of 2 of the Queen's Triathlon while it existed?
She won 3 out of 4, and then the year that she was pregnant with our son, she sat that one out, and
I hope so.
Our teammate won it though. So yeah.
Oh wow! I thought they only had it twice.
No, 4 times.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
I know she dominated.
No, she had some good races in there, and yeah, you know, and to whatever extent I had a little role even there, I was proud of that. But no, that was wonderful.
You probably had her doing wind trainers on her balcony.
We did do that a few times, as you know. Yes, you wrote a story about her for New York Runner when she did that, and yeah.
I had inside information.
Yeah, there you go.
But when we had a magazine at New York Roadrunners, which has since become more of a website, I got to write stories for it. It was the greatest job. That was a fun job, too. I would get certain friends of mine to write stories about other friends, or I would write them myself. So that was just great. Make people famous for their 15 minutes in New York Runner magazine.
There you go. Yeah, you can write about friends and call it work.
And
coach
good athlete friends like Nicole.
There you go.
She's a great person.
That's wonderful. Stuart, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be here today. I really enjoyed talking to you.
This was great. It went by in like 3 seconds.
Yes, it did. It always does.
We ran a personal best for that.
There you go. Well done. Finally, I just want to thank the Manhattan Neighborhood Network for hosting us. I want to thank Will Sanchez for once again trusting me to sit in the big boy chair. And I hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next time on Gotta Run with Will. Thank you.
Yeah, I honestly swear I thought it was like 7 minutes had gone by, which is